back to the story of Oiram and Peach. So, as we last left them, they had just returned to the seaside town where they had previously been employed by the Marquis Don Marquis, who had met his unfortunate end in the last part of our tale. And as we said before, this was a very rich, eccentric person who they had worked for, and they were the only two kind of main people left. If you recall, most of the people who had been employed by Don Marquis had been lost in the journey, the nocturnal adventure into the woods, and it didn't go very well for most of them, except for one who just kind of rode his luck, was happy-go-lucky, a fool, as some would call him. Didn't really think things through, but just kind of did whatever, and it seemed to work out for him. So that guy that was still with Oiram, and Peach still had her lucky coin that had helped her escape from this adventure, and they decided to go ahead and basically lay claim to the fortune of Don Marquis because there was no one else around to. So it turns out he had even more wealth than they had kind of thought. So much so that you might have called it a king's cash, or a king's cash twice over even. And Oiram and Peach, kind of seeing some sort of destiny in this, decided that they would each take a part of the fortune and sort of set up a friendly competition of who could do the most with it. And the seaside village, well, it really wasn't much of a town, but they both decided to kind of expand and try to set up their own lands, become their own lords, if you will, using this newfound cash and see how far they could get. To do this, both of them needed some settlers, so they kind of drew settlers from the town. As we said, it's a seaside town, so there were people coming in, looking for new opportunities as well, and each of them decided to set up their own towns. So both of them kind of had a part on the sea. So they had some fishmongers as well as part of their settlers, but the most important feature that was used for Peach is she decided to build a hippodrome for chariot racing in her village. This was the main thing that was going on there. And this drew in a lot of crowds, a lot of entertainment, even a lot of people who had been in the other town previously now started coming to live at the village, and it actually became a bustling village, almost to the status of its own town. Oiram kind of took a different route. He had kind of a roadway going down, but he decided he would kind of follow the advice of the so-called fool in deciding where to go. And of course, this fool decided, hey, you know what? We went in the forest before. Let's go back in there. Oiram was skeptical, but was like, hey, it worked before. I'm going to keep following this guy. Of course, they got lost in the woods while they were there. But after they'd come through a patch of the woods, they found a mountain pass, and the fool was like, here is where the village should be. This is going to be great. This took a lot of investment. In fact, the king's cash wasn't quite enough to get things going. Oiram had to even kind of take out a bit of a loan, take on some debt to clear out this mountain pass and make it a livable space, make some space on either side. But it turns out there were some other ponds and lakes around, flowing streams, that so he also could draw some of the fishmongers as well. Also, Oiram still kept contact with some of the people down in the port town, and as it would happen, a cutthroat who had previously been employed off and on by Don Marquis kind of came to him, and not realizing that Don Marquis was no longer in charge and that Oiram was in fact working independently, Oiram kind of, and he didn't feel too bad about this, right? Because this is just kind of ne'er-do-well cutthroat who he's conning here. So he came to kind of make a transaction with, he thought, Don Marquis to deliver these doubloons that he had managed to acquire, this cutthroat had. And Oiram was like, oh yeah, we'll take that, sure. And that actually went a long way to paying off some of the debts, and it really helped establish his own town. Also, it turns out there were some so-called snake witches that had been traveling through the area, through the mountain pass, also coming through the port. And each of them had a couple of them in their villages. And these snake witches, so it sounds like you might be saying, what's a snake witch? Well, it's not a sandwich, which it also kind of sounds like when you say it quickly. But it's also not a witch who can turn into a snake. Some people think that's what it is. It's actually a witch who can summon snakes to live in an area. So they kept employing these snake witches to, since it was kind of a friendly competition, so they didn't want to actually do too much harm to the other person's village, but, scaring people with snakes. Really, the snake witches, summoning the snakes, really what it did was it cut into the business hours of the chariot race down in the village that Peach had. And of course, Oiram also was benefiting a bit from these chariot races. He eventually managed to buy like a little team, get a team in the races, so he had like a stake in it. So the money was flowing into both of them. But mainly though, with the snake witches, they just set up kind of terrarium outside the hippodrome in the Peach's village, where all different sorts of snakes were there, and so that was taking away from the profits. So these snake witches, as we said, they were damaging each other's villages, but for the most part, it was not in any too threatening of a way, more an inconveniencing way or redirecting small amounts of revenue. And so that's how that went. And it turns out after a good 6 months or so, Oiram and Peach kind of compared notes, and they had been mirroring each other this whole time, right? So on occasion, if one person had built a house a certain way that seemed pretty cool, then the other person would copy them. So it wasn't like a secret competition that was high stakes too much. At one point, of course, Oiram had also followed a will-o-wisp. That's actually how he and the fool first got back from the mountain pass, because it's like, great, this is where we're going to settle. How do we get back to our port town? And they actually followed a will-o-wisp through the woods, so they were no longer lost in the woods, but they were able to actually have a regularized path that they could traverse. And so that's what really worked pretty well there. And and so at the end, they kind of compared notes, and it turned out Oiram had used his portion of the king's cash to make just a bit more money, have a bit more prosperity, fewer people in his town, but still, or his village rather. But so that's where we leave them now. There are two villages that are somewhat rivals, but mostly cooperative, and the people are doing pretty well underneath both of them. Some entertaining chariot races, still a few, ne'er-do-wells around back from Don Marquis days, but and some snake witches with some questionable practices every now and again, but mostly just for fun pranks, as it were. And so we end this chapter with both Peach and Oiram having fairly prosperous and wealthy provinces that they were kind of ruling over from their little village headquarters.